Yes, so it should say playing migration, accessing and understanding migrations through games. So this is only supposed to be a micro talk. I'm happy if anybody wants to ask questions later or through the chat, but I'm very, very lucky. I got to do a PhD in history, and then I got to spend a career in game development, and now I teach games. And I would argue that games are not only great at storytelling, and storytelling is also arguably the oldest art form. Contemporary games are not just about entertainment and escapism. Many of them are making claims to realism through the lens of reality-inspired games or interactive documentary, and they're taking traditional documentary ideas and concepts, along with the concepts of Bruce's performative documentary, into video games. And we now see new ways to tell stories, whether it's virtual reality, augmented reality, or this kind of hybrid mixed reality. But perhaps more understandably, we're seeing more and more stories being told through the smartphone as an interface to the game world. We see far more adaptation of stories with new technology and using stories to promote social change. We have the oxymoron of serious games, and really, this idea that you can play something and have a more interactive experience to improve your understanding. I would simplify this a little bit and just say games are the mass medium that people engage with in the 21st century. Certainly, the generations, my kids play games, but I've played games all my life. I think once you start playing games, you don't tend to stop. You maybe change what you play, and this is becoming more and more common. Now, migration as a policy issue can often be subvert the very personal stories, but the stories, when told, can often change perceptions of policy as they focus on people and not numbers. And my argument about why games are a good thing to do for this would simply be that, it's summed up by Braithwaite and Sharp in 2010, who said that much like photographs, paintings, literature, and music, games are capable of transmitting the full range of the human experience from one human to another, so too can games. Due to their interactivity, games are capable of a higher form of communication, one which actively engages the participant and makes them a part of the experience rather than a passive observer. And I can give you a few examples. So these are just 4 recent examples, recent being the past sort of 5-6 years. So Syrian Journey, Pick Your Own Escape Route, is a game that focuses on the Syrian conflict, that forced many Syrians to flee their home country due to the violence and political turmoil. It attempts to capture the uncertainty of their journey and the risks to their safety, capture, death, or deportation. The game's routes, options, and outcomes are all based on interviews with real stories, and it was published as a BBC Arabic digital project that then found its way to the main BBC news site. It's a very basic game. It's a almost choose your own adventure, but it's very well written, obviously because it's based on true stories. Finding Home is the image in the middle, is a serious game which aims to raise awareness of the cause of Rohingya and refugees. It is the Rohingya community is a Muslim community in Burma, regularly considered to be one of the most persecuted minorities in the world. The game invites you to play the part of a 16-year-old Muslim woman who belongs to that community. And the chosen interface for this game is a smartphone. The player has access to the main protagonist's contacts, photos, and music. And as you play, you receive calls, videos, audio messages. To progress through the story, you have to reply to those messages. The replies are generally multiple choice, and they don't really have much impact on the story itself. They give the illusion of choice, but it's definitely a game where the techniques that generate fiction-based emotions play an important role. These emotions are triggered by the way in which the story is presented, the screenplay, realistic videos, immersive game experience. So the smartphone interface here is quite important. Another example on the bottom is Refugee Mario, which was a satirical take on the original Nintendo video game. And it was being used to explain the reality for Syrians crossing Europe. Through the character Refugee Mario, a YouTube video showed the perilous journey taken by thousands seeking refuge in Europe. Smugglers take Mario on a risky journey across the Mediterranean Sea, where he eventually encounters Hungarian border guards and is thrown into prison. At several points through the video, Refugee Mario faces obstacles that lead to his death. The video was made by a 29-year-old Syrian man based in Istanbul, Turkey, going only by the pseudonym Samir al-Mufti. It's an incredibly powerful take because it takes something that is generally playful and subverts that. The image on the right, you can kind of just see the cobblestones in the bottom, but that was the human-sized board game, which was an immersive game played in a street to make people understand the different stories of the thousands of refugees who leave their home to reach Europe. Developed by Amnesty International, it was an activist who was trying to find the best way to communicate what she'd learned about migration. And she said, here it's quite tough to stop people in the streets to explain the campaign. Migration isn't perceived as big an issue because unlike in other countries, there are not so many arrivals. She was talking about the Czech Republic. But I believe it's important for people to hear about migrants' journeys and learn about their prejudices and stereotypes. For that, we needed an idea, something new, something provocative, something that would make people stop and think. And they created this human-sized board game. This gives you a range of the ideas of how people are taking migration and using it to tell stories. But the two probably most known games are this one, Papers, Please. This was Papers, Please demonstrates not only that a video game environment can be used to illustrate the issue of migration, but it's also not a barrier to creating strong artwork. And achieving this does not necessarily mean disregarding all the usual characteristics of video games. So there's interaction, problem solving. This was made by Lucas Pope. It was award-winning. The game is often mentioned as an example of that video game designers are just as capable of artists and film producers of creating true works of art. In Papers, Please, it takes place in a fictitious country under a dictatorship, and you play the role of a customs officer who has to review immigrants' paperwork and decide who they let in, but they have to do that job in order to feed his family. I'm going to show you a quick video, and hopefully the audio is going to work. Can I just check, is the audio working? This will probably be horribly loud now, so so you should just be seeing the screen, is that correct? Black screen. We'll try this.
It's working.
No.
So to try and explain the game, it's obviously something that's better played, but essentially the regulations governing the entry of immigrants into the country change according to the fluctuating political situation. This means that you, as the player, are faced with many ethical choices. For example, you might decide to let a woman through to see her sick grandfather on the other side of the wall, or to accept bribes, or to confiscate passports. Pope's game doesn't just give you the option of making ethical or less ethical choices, it obliges you to do so. In fact, because your earnings are meagre, poor performance will force you to take difficult decisions, buying either food or medicine, paying either the heating or the rent. In this way, Pope aims for the player to experience the dehumanizing work of a customs officer in a fictional world. The gameplay mechanics and mechanisms that he uses do not just make the game more immersive. The engagement of the player and the actions in the narrative and being able to influence the story all help create some empathy towards the fictional characters. If the customs officer decides to deviate from the country's regulations and lets somebody through illegally because they're persuaded by their situation, e.g., going in to visit their sick father or grandfather, and if they are more likely to be sent to prison for this, the player is more likely to experience a fear for their character. If the player is making the decision, then they can feel frightened for themselves rather than the character. The distinction is important because it opens up a range of possibilities regarding the emotions felt by a spectator or a gamer. It's a very short game. You can see by the graphics that it's not graphically intensive, but it's a deeply, it's a difficult game to play. In fact, I can sum it up with the next quote, which is, this was made by a journalist who said, as a video game, Papers, Please is stressful and often unpleasant. But as a piece of art, it's arresting and effective. Lucas Pope has captured the horror and doldrums of the gatekeepers of the world. I'm glad he kept the experience brief. I don't know how much more of it I would have been able to handle. And this is something that games are, starting to do more and more of, and have these emotional and unpleasant experiences to help people understand. And a different take on this is the game Bury Me, My Love. This is a very powerful interactive tale of one woman's migration from Syria to France. It first came out on mobile devices in late 2017. And it's a co-production between the Pixel Hunt, Figs and Art. The creative director is Florent Morin. Morin was inspired to develop the game after reading an article in the French newspaper Le Monde in late 2015. The article was about Dana, a young Syrian woman who'd left Damascus to reach Germany and a safer life. During her whole journey, Dana had kept in touch with her friends and family via a chat application. The messages they had exchanged were translated in the article, and they felt very close to the discussions that Florent had with his friends. Dana and her friends cracked jokes, sent each other emojis and selfies, asked for the latest football results, but also they discussed and compared the merits of smugglers and described dreadful situations. This feeling of both familiarity and total otherness made Florent think the story would be an excellent basis for the game. You progress through the game, you play it on your smartphone, and you progress through it by communicating with the protagonist Noor via WhatsApp SMS messaging service, and your role is essentially to help her reach Europe safely. And you use your smartphone. The game interface is a smartphone. The player is able to give her advice, take crucial decisions for her, or simply try to make her laugh. What makes the game captivating is the huge amount of research behind it, as well as the incredible script writing, both of which make the game particularly immersive. The game uses a timed mode, so your messages appear throughout the player's working day or the player's day at night if you leave it running. And it becomes emotionally engaging and realistic as you become worried when Noor takes longer to reply than usual. It's a very, very clever way of engaging people in the story. just to give you, one last kind of video, which is, it's quite a powerful video. It's for the charity War Child, but it gives you an idea about how charities are almost acknowledging that video games have an impact, even when they're creating film campaigns. So this is called Duty of Care.
انت وقفي ولي وقفي.
I'm going to stop there, but there's a link to all the references here, and you are welcome to go, and I'll send these through. You're welcome to go and watch some of this in more detail. But what I'm trying to say about a lot of this is that games are trying to take on these more serious issues, and some of them do them particularly well, and others don't. And part of that is it's a challenging environment to create something that is both interactive and meaningful, but also being respectful and treating the topics with true reverence. Now I'm going to pass you over to Akosh, who's going to tell you a little bit more about how easy it is to actually make games these days. But if anybody has any other questions, please put them in the chat and I'll get to them.